Hello, my name is Lauren, and this channel is called Lauren Fosters, where we talk about all things foster care and adoption. And this video is about where do I start? Where do I start if I want to become a foster parent or an adoptive parent through CPS or Children's Division or whatever your area calls it? So a little background about me. I'm a mom of 10 kids. I have foster kids, adopted kids. I have biological kids in my home. I'm also a military wife, which means we've moved around quite a bit. So we have fostered in 3 separate states at this point in our journey. So I'm going to come at this video letting you know that every area and every county and every state has very different rules. Okay, so unfortunately, I can't give you any hard and fast things, but I will tell you this. There's a quick and easy step 1. It's easier than you think. All right, you ready for it? Okay, this is step 1. This is where do I start? Find an agency. That's it. That's it. Because that's the thing. Once your family has really committed to this whole thing, that really is the next step, just finding an agency. I'll have another video about how to choose an agency, but for now, just realize that you can always switch later, and that's okay. So you're going to pick an agency. A great way to get good references for an agency to kind of see if it's your jam is to look for a local foster care and adoption group and start asking questions. Who have people worked with? Who have people enjoyed? Who have people really been able to trust with their journey? And those would be great agencies to call. So I would encourage you to look into community and start asking those questions. You may also be able to find local Facebook pages where people are asking the same kind of questions. So go check those things out. If you live in a larger area, you may even be able to find some reviews online. So feel free to Google those things and look those things up. I live in an area where we only have one agency. I will talk about agencies in another video as far as narrowing that down, but really, truly, step 1 is just finding an agency, calling, and then what they're going to have you do most likely is fill out an application, which is either going to be online or in person, depending on if they want to meet you in person and maybe have you fill out some other things at the same time. And that's kind of it, because from then on out, until you are licensed, they're going to start giving you lists of things to accomplish, and that's what they're going to expect you to do. So they're going to have certain paperwork they want you to fill out. They're going to have certain things they expect, usually a list for a walkthrough or a final inspection. They're going to have a list of things they may need you to do outside of that. For instance, CPR. My area does fingerprinting. I lived in a state once that did health inspections and fire inspections. So all those things should be on a list for you. If they are not, do not be afraid to ask your agency for those lists, and that way you can work through them. And here's where I kind of see would-be foster parents kind of freak out, because they go, oh, well, if I contact the agency, that's it. Like, there's no backing out. I'm kind of in it for life. And that's just not the case. So I had an agency say to me one time, and it was the sweetest thing. They said, your paper pregnancy can be as long or short as you want it to be. In other words, if I wanted to take my time filling out paperwork, that was okay. If I wanted to take my time getting my house ready for a walkthrough, that was okay. If I wanted to take my time getting to the appointments I needed to, that was okay. And there was no penalty for it, and they completely understood. Agencies would usually rather you take your time through the process and really be sure that this is something that's for you, than have you jump in it and then get a placement and then back out. Because every single time a child is placed, it's a new trauma for them. Every single time they're moved, okay? So we want kids to stay in the homes that they are placed in initially. One way to do that is making sure that you're trained well and that you're ready for it. And so agencies are going to understand if you want to put on the brakes a little bit and kind of pull back. So that means, let's say you get trucking along, you're trucking through your paperwork, you're getting everything done that needs to get done, and you just need a minute. It's okay to step back and say that you're not ready and that you need a minute, and that's okay. At some point in your licensing process, they will likely have you narrow down an age group, genders, maybe an amount of children in your home. And before that offends anybody that is watching this for the first time and maybe isn't in this world, that might be wondering why you would say no to any placement, it's because sometimes placements aren't appropriate. Let me give you an example. So if I have only teenagers and I'm kind of past that diaper toddler phase, maybe it's not safe to bring a toddler in. Maybe that's not okay to have a bunch of big teenagers running through the house while this little toddler is trying to be tended to. Now, some foster homes do that, and that's great, but that's not for everybody. Another thing is, say you've got only toddlers, right? You are in that diaper and crawling phase, and they ask you to take a teenager. It just may not be appropriate, especially if you've never worked with teenagers. That's not really your jam. It's okay to say no. That's why they want you to really narrow down that age. And when it comes to genders, it may be because Let's say you have all girls in your home currently. Maybe you want to stay with all girls, or maybe you have all boys, you want to stay with all boys. So that's kind of where they're going there. The other thing with the amount of children is every state has a different amount of children they will max you out at. So most states tend to be around 6, and I've heard 5 in some states. Some states can be well beyond that with waivers and that kind of thing. But the reason they do that, they might ask you, how many do you want max in your home, is because let's say you have 2 kids, right? And your state max is 6, okay? You may not want 4 more kids, and that's okay to say, we're maxing out at 2 more. Like going from 2 to 4 is plenty enough of a jump for us that we could not handle more than that. And that's okay. Agencies want you to speak up and say those kind of things. Now, a little bit of a disclaimer, and this is something you may learn along the way, and I hope none of you ever run into this, and all your agencies are awesome and amazing and totally have boundaries and that kind of thing, but some agencies will try to push that line. Usually whatever it says on your license should be what your agency sticks to. Now, have I worked with an agency that has tried to push that, change my license without my permission? Yes, I have. And unfortunately, it can happen, but I will tell you that they aren't allowed to change your license without your permission. So be clear, put your foot down, tell them exactly what you want and stick to it. So once you go through your licensing process, you will at some point have a home study, and it will be like an interview. And this is where my point of view and other people's point of view may be very, very different. So hold on to your horses. All right. So typically, I think the general rule of thumb that a lot of veteran foster parents and adoptive parents say is don't pre-talk about anything. Like, don't sound rehearsed, just kind of go into it and shoot from the hip and speak from the heart. I will say that's not what I did. My husband and I chatted ahead of time about what we wanted to share. We talked ahead of time with the kids to let them know what was going on, and we didn't give them a script or anything. My husband and I didn't have a script, but we wanted to make sure that we were honoring one another in an appropriate way. And even some of my story, and I'll talk about this in other videos, I'm former foster youth, and so I've kind of gone through a journey myself in life, and just making sure even that he understands it well enough to express it himself, because in some states they will do that whole conversation around the table. So as a family unit, in some states they will take maybe just the little ones and have mom and dad there, but maybe pull the older kids off to the side. And in some states, everybody will be interviewed separately. If they can talk, they're going to be interviewed separately. Sometimes that's a little scary for kids. So we did feel the need to kind of chat with them ahead of time and let them know that it was safe and that it was fine. So don't feel like you can't have that conversation. Despite what people are telling you, it will be okay. The other thing is when they do the final walkthrough, and let me just say this too, depending on your agency, it could be several walkthroughs. We've had the agency we have now does 2 walkthroughs. They do an initial one and then a final one. We've been in a state that does 1 official last minute walkthrough done by separate licensing people away from your agency. It's done through the county. We've had an agency that prepared us for a walkthrough. So the agency themselves came out several times, like, are you ready? Let me show you what to do, like super helpful. And then somebody came out to do a walkthrough. So once again, depending on your state and your county, that all could look very, very different. But there will be a point where someone somewhere is going to come and do a walkthrough. And this is another place where my opinion and somebody else's may differ a little bit, but I do want to say we got ready for it. Like, we cleaned ceiling to floor, we mopped all the things, we scrubbed all the things. And I know some people are like, well, just let it be natural. They know you have kids. Da, 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 da. I'm like, this is like a one-time thing. It's okay to scrub things down. It's okay to like make sure you don't like have a giant donation pile in your garage. Like, it's okay. It's just a one-time thing. So we did kind of like really go through the thing. And you know what? I will say this too, as a mom, it gave me a sense of comfort. I almost was nesting. You know, I talked about that paper pregnancy earlier. It was almost like a way of nesting for me and getting that out, as crazy as that sounds. So it's okay. If you are the kind of person whose house is just so tidy anyway and just so clean and wonderful, then by all means, I mean, go for it. But I needed to clean. My people can tear up a house on the super quick. So anyway, that's just my opinion. As far as what exactly is going to be expected and looked at through that walkthrough, you should get a list from your agency. So if you have not gotten a list, at that point, I would go ahead and ask. A lot of agencies do have them ready and on hand for people that ask. A lot of them will just give them out, and some may not even have an official list, but maybe they have certain things they want you to remember. A lot of places ask for a fire extinguisher, for example. I lived in one state where they didn't want loose wires. So like, you know, when you have your computer desk and there's a bunch of loose wires kind of all scrambled together, at least that's at my house, it's like that. They wanted them zip tied, which was kind of extreme. And once again, I've not lived in a place that extreme since, but it comes up, and those kind of things, if they're not on the list, you may not know. So don't be afraid to ask your agency for a list, or even say, can you come do a pre-walkthrough? Let me know if I'm missing anything, so when we get to that final walkthrough, we're ready to go. So now you've gone through the whole agency thing, you've gone through the paperwork, you've gone through the training, you've done a walkthrough, you've done the home study where they come interview you. They may also ask for fingerprints. They will most likely ask you to take CPR if you haven't already. In some places, even if you have already, they may ask you to use their preferred place. So don't be surprised if that comes up as well. The absolute final thing is you get handed a license. Once you're licensed, that's when the calls start coming in. And that's where you're going to be glad that you are very specific on your license, because here's the thing. There are going to be times you get calls that are not for the age groups, genders, amounts of children that you've had on your license. So that's where I'd be very clear and put your foot down if you need to. And don't be afraid to say no. It is okay to say no to an agency. They are not allowed to reprimand you for that. If you say no often, a lot of times caseworkers may kind of go, well, you know, maybe that's not the home to call if they're always saying no. But generally speaking, that's not been my experience. And so it's okay. Say no. And here's the other thing I don't think a lot of people realize is you may say yes, but they're not necessarily your yes means you're placed with that child. A lot of times what agencies will do is they'll call several people at once. And a lot of times Children's Division, CPS, may also be calling other families for that same exact case. And when that kind of thing happens, what they'll do is they'll kind of narrow it down. They'll say, you know, we've had like maybe 2 or 3 yeses. Maybe this home is the most appropriate. That's the one we're going to pick. And then they'll call you back a lot of times. So don't be surprised if you say yes, and then they say, okay, well, let me call you back and I'll let you know for sure. All right. So all that to say, you can say no, and your yeses don't even necessarily mean for sure yes. So don't be surprised if it goes that way. A lot of our areas are in super desperate need, so it's not super common where I live now to say yes and not be placed with that child. But I do want you to be ready for it, especially if you live in a large city or a large county where there are a lot of foster homes and a lot of different agencies represented, because a lot of placing agents could be trying to place the same child through different agencies. So don't be surprised about that. But anyway, I hope this was insightful. I hope it wasn't too much information. I will take the time to break some of these things down individually in different videos, but I wanted to get it out there because I'll tell you, this is the #1 question I'm asked. I mean, over anything else is, where do I start? And the answer is finding an agency. It's that simple. So anyway, I hope that helps, and you all have a good rest of your day. Bye. Local face group. You may also be able to find local face group.